Here's another single point linear perspective exercise which will render 3D letters that someone may wish to keep. Makes a pretty neat picture. Here I'm showing you one of my old worksheets. It's actually a help sheet. Talks about how to make 3D letters. They're almost collegiate letters, but they lack some of the serifs. If you're familiar with old LED displays or dot matrix printers, this will look very familiar. Many of these letters, however, have a little bit more resolution and detail than those letters would have had once back in the day. I'm going to focus in here on the part of the sheet that shows the rectangles that each of these letters are placed within. By placing letters neatly within rectangles, we can use this in linear perspective very easily. Also notice that the curves that you might see on the edges of letters are actually angles and have corners. That also makes it easier on us in this task. I'm going to start here by establishing my picture plane and drawing the shapes of letters before I actually establish my eye level. So you'll see that I am measuring from the edge of the page, and I'm doing this because I want to make sure that everything is nice and square and rectangular. And if I measure straight lines from the edge of the page, I know that the edge is vertical and the top and bottom are horizontal, and making those measurements will match up with the edge of the page wherever I measure them from, as long as I keep making the same measurements. In this case, my letters will be about 2 inches tall and about 1.5 inches wide, with 1/4 of an inch in between the letters. Most letters will be about the same width. Some letters you might make a little wider, like M's and W's, or you might not. The letter I, usually you make thinner than the others. Now you probably have noticed that I'm not just making measurements across one line across the top, I'm making them across the bottom line as well. By connecting them vertically, I will get vertical lines. If I don't do that, some of my lines might go a little just to the left, some might lean a little bit to the right. I don't want that. I want them pretty square. So I'm going to square this all up by measuring twice for each one. Now, like most of these visual exercises, I don't have a plan of actually what I'm going to write. I just know how I'm going to do it, and I'm going through the numbers. When I get there, I'll make a decision. I'm blocking this out for a basic 4-letter word. I'm doing this by eye at the moment, but really, if I were to measure this out, I would take either 1/8 or about 1/7 in this case of the way from the top to the bottom for the bottom edges of these letters, and then the middle, I would take it out of the middle block of 7, and then from the top, once again, about 1/7 of the way down, and I get basically 3 stripes, one at the top, one in the middle, one at the bottom, with a space for 2 of those in between. And then I'm going to block it off on the edge with what looks good to me, which is about 1/5 of the way across on each of these. And as you can see, I've already made a decision on what sort of word I'm going to write. It's going to be the word best. So I've got a B, E, S, and a T, which means I did a little bit of extra work. I put in some crossbars on the last letter that I didn't need there in the first place. I'm going to block out some corners here and make those faux curves. By faux curve, I mean because we're using straight lines to make what looks like a curved edge, the idea that the 45-degree angles on the top and the bottom, and even in the middle, will give us corners that we can draw lines from. It makes it easier for linear perspective. It's true in any drawing, but very, very true in a linear perspective drawing. It's just as important what we draw and what we erase and what we keep and what we don't keep. So I'm darkening in the outlines of these letters so that I don't keep the lighter lines that make up the framework that I built up to make the letters. So you can see the B and the E already. Now the S is probably one of the more complicated letters just because it has all of those faux curves on the sides. It's very rewarding to make an S, but at the same time it takes a bit of line work to do it. And the T then becomes very simple. So there's the word best. Now I'm going to put in another word, and I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to center it here, but if I move it over a little bit, I can probably get it pretty close to centered. The word is going to be friend, so I am blocking out some letters here to try to get that in there and see how I can best fit this across underneath the word best. Now, as you can see, I knew where the I was going to be, so I put that in all by itself. And all of the other letters are about the same size, the same width, and they match the letters on the top row as well. I'm going to speed this up and sort of get through this because it's all very regular and it's a lot of the same work over and over again. And I haven't even started on the linear perspective part. Now I have established all of my basic shapes. That's the flat part of the letter that's facing us. And I'm going to put in a horizon to give us an eye level and a vanishing point right about the center there. Once I've put the vanishing point in, then I'm going to start drawing lines back from every corner that I possibly can that doesn't run through the front of these shapes. You see how on this letter B I'm finding all the corners that doesn't run through the B or the E next to it. And then I move over to the E, and I'm going to find all of the corners and run them back to the vanishing point until I hit something, in this case the letter E, because it's not going to hit the letter S next to it. And the letter S isn't going to hit the letter E, but the lines from the letter T will hit the S, and the lines from the letter B hit the letter E. So you'll see that by working one letter at a time and going across and making all of these lines go back to the vanishing point, we're going to get that splash coming out of the page, just like Superman lettering coming out of your comic book. Once I've drawn all of the lines of perspective from the letters on the top, I'll go to the letters on the bottom. I use the same rules. The lines all go back to the vanishing point from the corners, either inside or outside the letters, and if they hit something else, another letter or the letter that I'm drawing from, then I will stop drawing that line as soon as it hits something. I'm drawing them from the letter, not from the vanishing point. That way I know that I'm going to be able to keep the line that I draw. Next, I'm going to clean up as much as I can and get rid of some of that horizon line. I'm going to break these letters off. I'm going to go about halfway back to the vanishing point, and I'm going to make a horizontal line across the bottom of each of these letters as it goes back in space. If you remember, when objects are at different levels on the page, they look like they're different distances. By keeping the letters all on the same level in the front, they look like they're the same distance from us. And by keeping the back end of the letters all on the same level, we're going to make it look like they have the same depth as well as being the same distance from us. Now on some of the lines that I draw here, I have to draw a little bit through the object to see exactly where things lie. And as I get to the back end, I'm going to match the angles of the back of the letter with the angles on the front. So horizontals remain horizontal and verticals remain vertical, but the diagonals at 45-degree angles are going to be diagonals. And you see that I'm drawing through here to find out where something actually shows on the back end, because sometimes things will go behind, like the part of that S there where I had to draw a little bit through the corner to find out where it was. You may have to do that over and over again, but in linear perspective, it's just as important what you draw as what you erase. So sometimes you have to draw through things a little bit to find out where back corners are that can't be seen in your picture. Do it lightly, not dark. If you do it dark, it will be hard to remove, but if you do it lightly, or if you just make little dots, then you can go back in and erase them, or if you barely drew it at all, it may not even be seen. Now I wish to do the same thing with the letters on the bottom. And to do that, I'm going to start at the top and work my way down, working away from the vanishing point in this case. As things overlap, it becomes harder and harder to see where things are, and once again, I will probably have to draw through things at least a bit to find out where corners are, where lines should be. I also need to remember that every time I draw a line on the back of a letter, it needs to match the line on the front. Now I'm going to start in with some shading. And shading is one of those things that sometimes can be a little bit difficult, especially here with a mechanical pencil. But you'll see that I've picked some different shades for different angles. In this case, the light is coming from above, so it's darker below. And I'm putting in shading on each of the letters without any shadows cast from the letters at first. I'm just going to put in the shading so that the bottom edge of each of the letters is darker. The face gets a little bit of just grayness, and then the sides, as they come around more and more upward, become just a little bit lighter each time it turns around and turns a corner. Now the letters in the upper part of the picture you can see underneath, and that's going to be the darkest area. The letters on the bottom part with the same light source are going to have a lighter top, and you won't see underneath any of the parts because your eyes are above them. Remember, the horizon is in the middle, above the letters on the bottom and below the letters on the top. So the top letters we look up at, and the bottom letters we look down on. So here's our finished sketch. You can see that the upper letters look a bit darker because we can see under them, and the lower letters look a little lighter because we see down on them. If we'd put the light source in the middle, we would get more of a chiaroscuro, or a central lighting, in our picture. But in this case, just having the light coming from above, we can see quite clearly the shapes and the forms. The shapes are those flat ends facing us, and the form is the three-dimensionality that doesn't actually exist here because it's all just linear perspective.